Hey everybody, Tim Adams here. Welcome to Church Tech again. And this week we're going to be talking about methods of communicating with church members. And to kind of kick us off is Charles Smith. So, Charles, take it away.
Okay, so to kind of start out talking here about methods to communicate with church members, just to let you know, I come from a church of less than 100 members with a very small budget. So a lot of the things I'm about to mention are just kind of tools that I've run across that are free, that are something to play with. They may not be the best tools out there, if you're going to pay money for them, but, they're things that I've found that's kind of worked for us, and they might be a benefit to somebody else, or they might at least launch you onto a launch pad to find a better service if they don't meet your needs. So to kind of start off with things, kind of the first thing, a lot of us use to communicate with our church members happens to be the church bulletin, if your church has one. I know a lot of churches are starting to move away from bulletins, but we're still one that has one. So kind of the tools I'm going to mention here are kind of an evolution of process of things that have come about, as I've been trying to improve communication with our church. So the first thing we had was the church bulletin, but you've only got so much space to put things on a church bulletin, then you run out of room. But a lot of people take these things home, and they might look at them later. So started integrating more things into the bulletin with references to things that they could look at online when they get home. And there's two ways that you can kind of leave a trail in the bulletin for somebody to find more information online when they get home. A lot of times, when you're doing a web page and you're building it, it might have a huge, long link for that page. But there are things that you can do that are called, they go by various names. They're called like Vanity URLs, or I call them alias URLs. So it's basically like your website and then like a keyword at the end of it that'll take you straight to a page on your website. And that page can be a publicly viewable web page, which some of our bulletin links are, and some of them are not public links. They're hidden from the sitemap of the web page. Basically, if you don't have this link, you can't find that page. And I'll show an example of one of those here later. But Vanity URLs, depending on your website provider, they may provide that option to you where you can create a link to any page, and they're quite handy. But if your website provider does not provide a way to do a vanity URL, there's several free tools, but I don't have a screen share of those that you can use to create a shorter URL. Google has one. There's one out there called Bitly. They're about a dime a dozen. If you just go to Google and type in URL shortener, you'll find a ton of them out there. But let's say you've got a bulletin and somebody wants to look at that extra info while they're in church. Well, they may not have a computer in front of them, but where are they going to have? Probably one of these, a smartphone. So you can also put these little barcodes that you've probably seen in advertisements on your church bulletin, and the barcodes will essentially take you to those same web links through your phone so that you don't have to type it in. So kind of with that being said, I'm going to start a screen share here, and the rest of my conversation will probably be completely screen share. But first of all, I wanted to show you the QR code site that I use. So let's say, for instance, you want to do a QR code to a particular site. I'm just going to type one in here. And let me just go ahead and zoom in a little bit so it probably shows up better on everyone's screen. Okay, so this is a short URL or a vanity URL that we have created that if you're in church and you don't have your Bible with you, or you don't have your I go to a Saturday church, so we call it a Sabbath school lesson. You might call it a Sunday school lesson where you go. If you don't come to church with a Bible or a lesson study for that week, this is actually a short link that will take you to a web page with all sorts of mobile websites or apps that you can download and install your phone so you can have a Bible or a lesson study guide if you didn't have one. But as you can see, I typed it in here as a URL, and typically you want to go ahead and do what's called a static QR code. And I'll explain more of the difference about that later. And then you hit the little generate button here. And when you do, it gives you a little picture here. And of course, you can just right click on that picture, copy it, and paste it into your church bulletin or whatever you have, and that works for most smartphones. Now, the difference between a dynamic and a static QR code is a static QR code is once this picture is generated, that picture is there from here until forever and will always take you to that one website. But what some people tend to do, I haven't gotten into this practice yet, but a dynamic QR code will create this barcode here, but it's actually going to a website behind the scenes that you can constantly redirect to other places. So you can kind of change the web linkage behind the scene without changing your image. It's a pretty advanced deal, but most of the time, like I say, when I'm generating QR codes, I've already created a Vanity URL. So if I wanted to change where this QR code would go, I wouldn't change the QR code, and I probably wouldn't change this Vanity URL. I'd probably change where the Vanity URL goes. So just another way to manage things. So like this website, this one, the Mount Pleasant, Texas, SDA.org/tools, actually takes you to this page. And this is the page that, has links to like a Bible app for Apple or Android. And I'll just zoom this in here where it shows up a little better. The other thing you can kind of do, our website's actually mobile friendly. And this also helps if you have a mobile-friendly website, but notice how I resized my window here. And you notice that the content dynamically resized to the size of my screen. Well, imagine the same thing if you're on a tablet or a cell phone. That's where your screen size is potentially going to get smaller. And if you notice, see, as the screen got really small, it made this, instead of into a table, into inline links. So just some neat things you can do once you get into developing mobile web pages, which, believe me, is a whole other topic unto itself. But that's kind of an example of a public vanity URL that we have. Now, another vanity URL that we have that is not public is this one here. This is actually our treasurer's report. We actually have it on the back of our bulletin in a briefer format, but for the things that won't fit on the back of the church bulletin, we put the rest of the information on this web page. And you'll see up here at the top in the address bar is a full URL, which of course you're not going to want to put that in a bulletin. So in reality, the vanity URL for this is basically our website /treasury. And when I hit enter on that, you'll see it basically takes you to that page. So just give you an idea of what vanity URLs look like and what pages they go to. Now, as far as the QR codes and the end result, here is a copy of our bulletin. So this QR code down in the bottom right, there's nothing really calling attention to it because we honestly didn't have space to say what this QR code is for. But that QR code actually takes you to the tools link. So, if you get somebody in your church and they just like, what's this QR code? And they go bleep and scan it, it'll take them to the tools page where they can get a Bible or a lesson study or whatever. Now, in the back of our bulletin is where we have, like I said, the treasurer's report with that QR code, which that one, of course, I haven't spelled out with the web address at the bottom and the QR code because we had the space for it. So just some ideas of some things you can use to communicate with your members through your church bulletin using vanity URLs and QR codes, just something handy to show. Now, the next thing you might wonder about, and I'll go back to actually my camera for this for a moment, is besides communicating with members through your church bulletin, you may also have the need of coming up with email addresses. Like, say you have somebody that's a leader, like a youth leader, and they might communicate with the public in that, but they don't want the public getting their real email address. So what you can typically do, and it depends on where your email provider is, but in our case, our church has signed up for Google Apps. And Google Apps allows you to take your domain name, which you already own, and they'll kind of link up to your domain name and take over the mail record for your domain name. And then you can create many, many, many different email addresses. And, if you've got a church member that wants to run a ministry and wants to keep that ministry email separate from their other email, they can very well do so. But if they don't, if they want to just get a copy of it to their own email, you can just set up these what I call vanity email addresses to give to the public and have them forward to the person's actual email address, which actually that's what we do with our pastor's email address. On our website, we have pastor@ourwebsite.com as his email address. Is that his real email address? No. It just forwards to it. Now, the neat thing about Google Apps, and I'll go back to screen share for this, is Google Apps is normally a paid service for small businesses. However, for churches, Google Apps is free. The only thing you have to prove when you're signing up for Google Apps, in this case Google Apps for Nonprofits, is you have to provide them with like your tax ID number. So if you don't know what that is or how to get it, you probably need to see your church treasurer, and your church treasurer can give you that information so that you can sign up for Google Apps and get basically free email service for your entire church. Also with that, you get access to like Google's Drive service and store files there. Also, when you sign up with Google Apps, guess what? You get a free YouTube account for your church. So you can post 30-minute, hour-long, hour-and-a-half-long videos versus, unless YouTube's changed their policy, personal accounts, there's a time limit on the videos that you can upload. I think they can only be like 5 minutes long or something. That policy may have changed though. But if you've got a Google Apps for Nonprofits account, then create a YouTube account based off of that. It's just like having a YouTube account for business. You can do a lot of different things with it. Now, the next thing that we kind of started wondering about is, sometimes you'll have events going on in your church, so you want to have a good calendar for everybody to look at, but there's sometimes events that you have in your church that are not necessarily events for the public, like, say, a church board meeting or a church business meeting. Those sort of things you want your members to know about, but not necessarily the public. So having a good calendar service helps out with that as well. And of course, since I kind of plugged Google Apps for Nonprofits, a good calendar service is also Google's calendar service, because you can create a calendar under Google kind of like you do in a corporate world. In a corporate world, there's group calendars with multiple people that can edit it, and you can subscribe to it to get updates and things. Well, Google Calendar works well for that, as long as, of course, you have a Gmail account or some form of Google account. So we use that for an internal church calendar. It's listed on the back of our bulletin. The only drawback to, of course, having an internal calendar versus an external calendar for the public is, of course, the external calendar for the public is maintained separately. So when you have something that you're doing for the public right now, I'm basically updating 2 calendars, which I'm trying to find a way to streamline that workflow process. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But honestly, we have more internal events than we do external events. I know that's probably bad for a church, but right now I'm spending more time updating the Google Calendar than anything. And what's really neat about having a Google Calendar is, once again, if you have a smartphone, when you sign up, like at least in my case, I have an Apple device and an iPhone, so I've configured my Gmail address on my iPhone, which of course has permissions to this Google Calendar. Therefore, I can basically create, delete, edit group calendar entries right from my calendar app on my phone. It's pretty slick. So it's pretty good as far as making it simple where you can just do it right on your device on the fly, because we've all probably been there. You're in your church, the pastor says, oh, I'm going to have this next Friday night. And it's like, oh, how am I going to remember that to get it on the calendar? Well, if you've got a Google Calendar and it's set up on your phone, bam, you get it done. So that's a thing. Now, another tool that's kind of handy is, we all have leadership that does things in the church from week to week. And there's a service out there called Planning Center Online for, coordinating church volunteers and making sure people sign up for things, and then they get reminders for things. And it works really well for large churches, when you've got a lot of volunteers. And of course, there's a price associated with it. So when I was looking for a way to coordinate things between leadership and the church, I was looking for something, of course, fairly free or low cost. So I found this service that is called Remindio. And it's actually based out of Britain, I believe. and it works fairly okay. I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of the view. Once you get into it, it has kind of a calendar view, and you can go in here and create events and reminders for leadership. There's a couple of catches to it, though. For the free version, you can only keep 5 people copied on events and remind them of things. So like if you notice over here on the right, since we're a Saturday church, every Saturday there's a This Week at Church thing. And for each one of those, I have like a 5-day reminder and then a 1-day reminder that goes out. But like I say, with the free version, you can only have those reminders go out to 5 people. There is a paid version of this service that costs $22 a year. I used it for a few months, and I don't know if their service has improved, but when I went to their paid service, not all of my people were getting the email reminders. Don't know why. I asked their support, what the issue was, and they kept saying, well, check your spam filter. Make sure, the email address that these get sent from, which is a @remindio.com address, is in your whitelist for your email. Everybody I had, it was in their whitelist, and they still weren't getting the emails. It was like only the first 5 people were getting the emails, and everybody else after that weren't getting them, even though I was paying for the service. So they may have improved the quality of their service since then. I mean, I'm still using them, but of course I've reverted back to a free account. And if somebody's not in that list of 5 people, of course I'm one of the 5. When the reminder comes to me, I just forward that email on to the additional people that weren't onto the list. So, it's got its clunky things about it, but once again, for low cost, it kind of serves the need. And some people may ask, why am I not using the internal Google Calendar for that? The internal Google Calendar, I haven't found a real good way for it to do automated email reminders for things unless you are personally subscribed to the calendar. And a lot of the people in my church may have email addresses, but they're not Google addresses. They don't want to create a Google email address, that sort of thing. So instead of trying to bring them into the Google ecosystem, I guess, I've just stuck with this Remindio service. If I could get everybody to create a Gmail address, then yes, I could probably do this all within the Google Calendar. Now, the next thing after that is, I've talked about, keeping your members informed through the bulletin, keeping them informed of events through a private calendar, and of course we have a Vanity URL for that. I forgot to mention that. Keeping leadership informed of events going on. The next thing is, well, what about if you're in the middle of an event and you need to coordinate things like between the front of the church and the back of the church? A service that kind of works really well for that is called GroupMe. And the name, I wish they would pick another name because it almost sounds a little perverted, but it's called GroupMe. And what's neat about this app is it actually creates what's called a group texting account. And if you've got a smartphone, you can install the app on your smartphone and send group messages out to a group of people. Now, there's 2 catches to this service. One is, of course, since it's a group texting service that's 2-way communication, it is prone to the dreaded reply all. So let's say you had 30 people in your GroupMe list, and one person says, hi. All 30 people get that hi. If somebody else says hi back, all 30 people get the hi back. If somebody says, I'm tired of these messages, take me off this list, all 30 people get those messages. So GroupMe is really intended for small groups, like I say, once again, leadership groups, if you're trying to coordinate something during an event. Like let's say you've got some sort of outreach event for your public going on, and it's a big presentation deal, and you don't have like talkback mics for your presenters or your performers if it's a music deal. This can work in place of talkback mics. Now the other catch to GroupMe, besides the reply all thing, is they actually I read some history on them. They kind of got pursued legally because a person got on a GroupMe list that they didn't want to be on, and they considered it spam and kind of started a lawsuit over it. So, as a gotcha of that, I've kind of highlighted this text here, and there'll be a link to this page in the show notes. But if you're starting a GroupMe list and you add 5 people to that list, all 5 of those people need to send a message at least one time, like an initial hi or something. Because if they don't respond once they become a member of the GroupMe list, after 7 messages, they're going to get a warning saying, we're going to stop sending you stuff because you're not an active participant. And then after 12 messages, be it text messages, they don't get anything else ever again until they reply. So if you're going to start a GroupMe list, you need to make sure your people that are involved in the GroupMe list are going to be active participants. And at least at some point, like I say, they have to do that initial hi. After they do that initial hi or some sort of message, they'll get every GroupMe message from that point forward. But GroupMe kind of put this initial setup thing in their program after that lawsuit, but they didn't really document it well. It took me a while just to find this article on the internet. But with those 2 catches, the dreaded reply all and the fact that once you get signed up, you need to reply at least once, GroupMe works well for small group immediate coordination via text message. Now, the next thing as far as trying to keep members aware of events, we had the calendar. People may not necessarily be looking at it, so it's like, how do we put information in front of people? You don't want to be annoying about it, but at the same time, if you don't put information right in front of a person's face, if you just say, here's the URL, go take a look at it, people will never look at it. So, a lot of churches out there, they'll have a public Facebook page. So, of course, here's a copy of our public Facebook page for our church. But you don't want to have all this internal communication over your public Facebook page. So what do you do to try to have internal communication among your members and try to keep them communicating? Well, you start an internal or private Facebook group. When you create a group in Facebook instead of a page, you can mark that group as what's called a secret group, which basically means if you're in the group, you know about the group. If you're not in the group, you don't know about it. So it's like Fight Club. Anyway, I digress. But so yeah, a private Facebook group is good for keeping your members informed on what's going on, but once again, it involves active participation. Church members really have to come to this group page to look at it, because the way Facebook has changed their algorithm on what's shown up in your news feed, if you make a post in your private Facebook group, it may or may not show in a person's news feed. They need to actively be looking at this page. So that's kind of a challenge there. So the next thing is well, let's say you're in a church that has a few technology capable people, but you've got most of your members are older and they don't even know how to use a computer. So how do you keep those members informed of what's going on? Well, as of this week, this is actually hot off the presses, our church has just signed up for this service called DialMyCalls. And this is actually, out of all these things I've mentioned, this next to Remindio, this service does cost. DialMyCalls, there is a free version where you can send a 30-second message to 25 people once a week. Well, that's actually smaller than even most small churches. That's smaller than us, so we had to upgrade to a paid account. But the good thing about DialMyCalls is that even though it's a paid account, churches get a 20% discount. So in our case, we fall into the range of people where there's like, I want to say 50 to 100 people. I think that was the demographic we fit in under. And for that price, normally it's like $15 a month, but we're getting it for like $12 a month. They basically knock 20% off if you're church. So our church actually decided to pay for this service for $12 a month so that we could send out a weekly call out to all church members with a pre-recorded voice message saying, here's the things that are happening at church this weekend. We'd love for you to come to church, stay longer for the things that we're having after the service, things like that. So we're starting to use DialMyCalls because, like I said, people weren't checking their email regularly enough. They weren't checking the internal Facebook group enough, this actually gets messages out in front of people because you're calling them. Some people might consider that annoying, some people may not. We're trying it out. People actually, when they get a call from the DialMyCalls service, there's an option in it where they can press 7 and be placed on a do not call list, and me as the administrator, I can go in there and see people that have unsubscribed to this service. So it's pretty powerful, and like I say, at $12 a month, that's pretty cheap. I mean, even if our church can subscribe to it, then that's doing pretty good. So with that being said, that's kind of most of the things I had to talk about as far as free tools. Like I say, as Tim likes to always say on these Hangouts, it's just tools in the toolbox. You may have better tools, bigger tools. These are my small tools, and they work for me. So all of these links that we talked about have been sent to Tim. They'll be in the show notes. There's other things out there that you can do to inform your members of things, like having a newsletter. And Paul's actually started a video series on how to do an email newsletter to your members that is actually pretty handy, so I'm going to kind of plug Paul's stuff. And with that being said, I'm going to kind of throw it to Paul, and Paul's going to kind of share some tools he's got for keeping members informed.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm a huge proponent of is email newsletters, and the reason behind that is that so many churches think, oh, well, we'll just send a newsletter through the mail, or we'll have paper copies, and that's really not the most effective way to get the message out. And so some of these churches, no problem, we'll step into the 21st century. Isn't there something called a listserv? Maybe we should get one of those listservy things. And yeah, that's not a good plan either. And someone else will suggest, hey, let's, you know that BCC, that means blind carbon copy. We'll just do that. Also not a good plan. You get the reply all problem that Charles was talking about earlier. And it's also a problem that if your email service provider, whether you're using apps for Gmail or you're using the email service that came with your website or something else, heck, even if you're using like a yahoo.com email, if you send out 100 emails every week to the same 100 people, let's say your church is about 100, you're going to start to see that your account gets blocked because it's going to think you are just sending out random stuff about insert spammy subject here. So that's really not a good plan. A better plan is to use the same kind of tools that when you sign up for a newsletter online you use. And what I recommend, because for the vast majority of churches this is going to be free, is MailChimp. And it's what I use for my own newsletter, so that's just a testament of how it does. And I'm in the midst of a series on it, as Charles pointed out. Basically, you can sign up for MailChimp, and it will come from your church's email address. Once you prove that it's your email address, they send something, you have to put in a code, you know, that basic stuff. And then you can do all kinds of great stuff. You can have separate groups, so you could have like a youth group. You could have a parents group for elementary school students. You can have a senior adult group. And then you can send the one newsletter for the church to all of those, or just, I'm talking right now, honey, or you can send individual messages based on the group to the ones that care most about it. So that's really a powerful thing. And just to show you, my church, up until recently, we were in the 5,000s. I think we're in the 4,000s. We had some problems with some leaders, but all that to say, we're using MailChimp, and it works perfectly fine. In fact, just this week I got one because here in Kentucky we've had over a foot of snow, and the kids have been out of school all week long. And I got an email the other day that said, all events on all campuses are canceled Wednesday and Thursday. Very effective way to reach out to the entire church and basically say, if you have a meeting, if you have anything going on Wednesday night or Thursday night, we're not having those. The roads are too bad. Stay home. Be safe. We care more about you staying alive than getting to heaven and Jesus saying, you're early. That's not what we want. So I think this is a really great way of doing it. And in each email newsletter, you can put links to all the things that Charles was talking about, links to your calendar, links to special events and such, and then people can click on them directly. This is a great way to get the information out, and quite frankly, it's about 1,000% more effective than having a PDF newsletter that is on the website that people have to find and remember to download and remember to look at. This is sent directly to their email, and I don't know if you're like me, but I check my email like a bazillion times a day, and I get probably a dozen different email newsletters, so why not have one from my church? And that's exactly what I have. So that's why I'm recommending that across the board for churches as a great free way to get out important information quickly and reliably.
I agree. I have a MailChimp account for my business. I don't really use it, but it's nice to have. I do need to start using it, but it's an incredible tool to use, and you aren't limited to newsletters. You can do surveys if you want to, and that kind of thing. I actually have their pricing information pulled up, and according to their website, you sign up and you have 2,000 or less subscribers, it's free. There's no money required. And I think for most churches, would probably fall into this category. And I think I haven't noticed any issues with MailChimp. The one thing that I would caution, even if you're in a church situation that has an actual membership, like my church doesn't have membership or books, is that from a legal standpoint, I think it's important to go through to create a process for people to opt in. So maybe you could send out one mass newsletter, and then in that newsletter you have a link to say if you'd like to continue receiving monthly updates or weekly updates, please click on this link and that is their opt-in. I know that I just started randomly sending newsletters when I was producing them for a short span of time to just people on my business contact list, and somebody wrote back and said, yeah, legally you probably shouldn't be doing this. So that would be my only caution, but use your best judgment. I'm not going to tell you that it's wrong. I'm not going to tell you that it's right. Just use your best judgment. I am curious what questions we have. This is really great information. It's not directly related to, audio, video, lighting, or projection, but I think it's an important aspect of technology that a lot of people don't realize is available, particularly smaller churches. So, Tim, do you have any questions that are popping into your head? Are you guys doing any newsletter stuff? I'm not sure.
There we go. I just wanted to unmute. That's all. No, actually, I think our church is doing basically they're doing sorry, I'm trying to kill the audio on this other thing here. Sorry about that. We're doing just a basic paper bulletin thing, and that's about all we got going right now. So it's a bigger church, but they stick with it. They're old Lutherans,
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I think, as I am prone to say, thank you, Charles, it is a toolbox, and you need to find and talk about and discuss and decide what tools are right to use for you and your particular situation. I, for one, know that in our church, they do send out a weekly newsletter. We also have a private Facebook group. We actually have, I don't know how many private Facebook groups. We have a church tech group for just us techs. We have a creative team. I think it's basically we have a Facebook group for each team. And then I lead a men's group on Wednesday nights, and so I'm going to be creating a group for that. We've been relying on kind of an event page to this point, but I'd like to kind of close it down so that we can talk about things without everybody else in the world being able to see them. So I think that Facebook group is an incredibly awesome idea. It's an incredible tool, and given privacy considerations and that kind of thing, probably not the best place to be, doing like active men's group, I don't know, therapy sessions, let's say. But it's a great way for people to stay in touch with each other on the go, and they can respond when they're able to, and it's not like on a phone call. It's kind of like there's this pressure to respond immediately. And there's kind of a stigma with text messaging as well, that it's kind of an instant thing. And I know that there are some people that I know that if I don't respond to their text message immediately, they're like, "What in the world is going on? It's supposed to be instantaneous and communicate with me." And it's like, chill out, So again, I think it's just finding the right tools for you. And as far as I'm concerned, this Hangout is really just kind of introducing the ideas or introducing the resources that are available right now to churches of all sizes. So I certainly appreciate Charles doing that level of research and finding what was available, and Paul for sharing your experience and what your church is doing. Let's talk about Planning Center, because I know that Planning Center kind of encompasses a really broad span of services, of which I honestly don't know the full span. We use it at our church. We're a mobile church. We get about 140, 150 a week. But our setup and teardown crews are like close to 30 people. So that's a lot of people to kind of coordinate. And so Planning Center is used primarily for that. But I know that there's Paul, maybe you could talk about the integration of Planning Center into ProPresenter, because I know that there is some integration there. And then anybody else want to chime in that uses Planning Center in other ways?
Yeah, Planning Center, as the name suggests, I think it started out with worship plans, the order of worship. And so that's what integrates into ProPresenter. So with ProPresenter 5, you can have someone create the order of worship, and then you have that hooked in directly into ProPresenter 5, and you have a couple of options. So it's not necessarily the case that it automatically updates if any changes are made, in case you have some people that like to tweak things and mess up. But it could be. If you know, hey, there's only one person that does it, and if they make a change, I want that change immediately, you can have that set up. We also use it at my church, not only for the orders of worship, but we use it for scheduling volunteers. So I'll get a text message saying, hey, you've been put on the schedule to run graphics this week and be on a camera that week, and so on. And that gives me an opportunity to say accept or decline. That's really nice, so that the person in charge of scheduling can tell, okay, this person's available, this person's not, and ahead of time You know, like I know I'm going to a marriage conference March 13th in Cincinnati, so I'm going to block out that time so that they don't even bother trying to schedule me because I'm not available. So that's really good. The music team, you can upload MP3s into it and also PDFs, so they can listen to a new worship song that's just come out that the worship leader wants to do, and then get the lead sheet and start practicing their music before they even come to practice. So it's not, now what's the rhythm of this? I've never heard it before kind of thing. It's more they show up and they're gelling together during practice and they're all together as opposed to doing it other ways. You can even upload videos into it and do things like that as well. So it's really powerful software, and you know, that's why it costs money. If it was just kind of only did one little thing and did it then it would be free, I bet. But so that's what I know about Planning Center.
Awesome. Anybody else in the Hangout use Planning Center? I'm guessing not. Tim, you have a question for the group, so let's hear it.
Well, I wanted to check and see if anybody has heard of Slack before.
I have not.
You have not?
I have.
Okay. I've actually looked into it very briefly. It's a collaboration tool, and I can't remember, the guy that built it is a guy that built something else that we all use, and I can't remember what it was at the time, but it looks to be very interesting because you can dial that down to just the specific people that use a specific, or in a specific group. So if you have sound guys that are going to do whatever project, you can go down right to the project level, and it has real-time chat functions that also archive everything, so it's not instant always. I don't have a lot of experience with it. I'm thinking about trying it at our church with our technology team that we're forming, and using it to collaborate between the people that are developing content and getting it to me, because there just seems to be a big void in between those two. So I just didn't know if anybody here had heard of it or not.
Yeah, looking right now, I can't remember if it was Slack or if it's another tool, but there's a service called Coach.me. They used to be called Lift.do, and basically they've pivoted from reminding you to do the things that you say you want to do to what they do now, which is provide coaching for things that you do. And I'm a coach for email newsletters, strangely enough, Twitter, and a couple of things. And so on the back end, there is a third-party service, and I think it is Slack. So I'm looking to see if I can find it, and if so, I'll bring it back up.
Yeah, if you want to look into that, Paul, and maybe you can do a screen share so people know what the website looks like. And while we're doing that, we had a question come in on the event page from Craig Lawrence, and he's wondering if any of us have had experience with online meeting place services, so like GoToMeeting or WebEx, that kind of thing, which would be similar to what we're using, Hangouts on Air. I'm not sure exactly what information he's after as far as context. He just wrote back and he says, for alternatives to face-to-face interactions like meetings or group studies. Okay, so like small groups, or say like a board meeting or something like that. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't personally have any experience with that. I know that I have often thought about doing like a small group thing, using a technology like that, using the Hangout interface, not the Hangout on Air necessarily. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that's a valid use of that technology, or do you have concerns? What do you think?
Yeah, so like
Well, I think that,
Charles first.
GoToMeeting. Yeah, I was going to say like GoToMeeting and WebEx, things like that. I mean, I use those in business all the time. And those things tend to work best from a broadcast perspective, like a private broadcast where one person's broadcasting, a lot of people are watching. The interaction can work okay. It's just, most of the time your audience is not necessarily tech savvy, so the interaction is tough to achieve. But as far as it compared to Google Hangouts, pretty much the same. It's just Google Hangouts is free. Those other options do cost. They do have mobile apps, which work pretty good. Honestly, I've seen GoToMeeting work a little bit better than WebEx. Screen shares on WebEx can be a little bit problematic depending on your computer resolution. But, I mean, they're very valid tools. I mean, you could use them for a small group meeting, like as I would call it, a multi-person Skype. That might be, the goal here is to have like a multi-purpose I can't talk, multi-person Skype. But honestly, being on these Hangouts with most everyone here, granted with Hangouts, I will say you have to be a little more tech savvy because it can be prone to hiccups every now and then. But with that being said, I mean, I'm loving Hangouts for a free multi-person Skype type communication. I mean, I know Skype has the option to do multi-person chat. They've now made it a paid service. You have to pay to play. But this is pretty good. I mean, if I had even like, say, I've got family across the country. If I had an option where I could get them all online and have a group chat session online as a family reunion or something, I would do it. Problem is, I can't even get them on Skype because of, technology issues and the lack of knowing how to operate such things. Anyways, on to Paul.
yeah, I was going to say that I've used things like this, like GoToWebinar, and which is by the same people as GoToMeeting, strangely enough. And I think they're great for, hey, I'm teaching you something. So it might be great if the pastor wanted to lead something, or a Sunday school teacher wanted to do it. I think for something where it's lecture style, a webinar kind of service is fine. Something where you want more interaction, I think Hangouts is better. I just wish that Google was better at making it easier to use. One of the things that what I've used a lot for my webinars, and that's just because I got in early, so I've got a free beta account, but there are also other accounts that are, they start out, I think it's 25 people for free, so for a small group or just an online training or something like this, it might be perfect for most churches, is BigMarker, BigMarker.com, and they also have kind of a discussion forum that's integrated in that, so you can schedule these webinars and you can have discussion before and after as well. So that's something else. I think from a technical standpoint, the thing that I really do not like about GoToWebinar is even if I do 2 webinars in a row on the same day, it makes me download something. So I stop one, it shuts that down, and then this other doohickey starts downloading, and then it pops up. So I don't understand at all why it couldn't just be you click on this other thing and it starts. It's just annoying to me, and it takes a long time. And that, from my perspective, that's also the downside of Hangouts, is like when Tim called for this Hangout, it took me 5 to 7 minutes to even get to the screen where it hung up, and I had to shut down Chrome and restart it and do all kinds of craziness that, like, my mother could never do. So I think there's an opportunity out there for a service that's as cooperative as Hangouts, that you could also use as a webinar, kind of one-on-many kind of teaching thing, but none of them are very good right now. So that's my feeling on it.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I think it probably has to do with something along the lines of like a trusted certificate that has to be downloaded for each different instance of the meeting, just because it is secure. But I don't know, Charles could probably talk to that a lot more intelligently than I could. But I think it could be a valid tool. But you're right, you know, it's hard when you have a group of people that represent a wide gamut, if you will, of technical aptitude. And the last thing you want to do is hold up the meeting because, you know, 3 people out of 10 can't figure out how to get it to work. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea for a tool, just there are some caveats to it, and if you can overcome those hurdles or those obstacles, then I think it'd be a great tool, honestly.
Yeah, one thing to mention here, you know, that's the thing, is anytime you get into video chat, you got to know a little bit of something about technology. But let's say you want to do a men's meeting or a women's meeting over the phone. There's several different ways to do that. The one way is, of course, do a bunch of 3-way calls. You 3-way call somebody, somebody else 3-way calls somebody, you know, and eventually you get a grand conference call out of that, but that can be tough to manage. Another option that's available out there, there's actually conference services out there that will give you a phone number to call into for a conference call, just like you would in the business world, and it's totally free. And I've used that one before. It's called freeconference.com. Just 2 words altogether, freeconference.com. And it works well. In fact, you know, I've used it once, maybe twice for church board meetings, but I actually use it in the business world. I mean, for my business stuff, instead of signing up with a corporate account for conference calls, since I use it so infrequently, I can't justify the cost, so I just use free conference for even my business stuff. So something else to keep in mind, you know, to keep video out of the mix, because video is what tends to complicate things for the average user.
I would agree. Tim, you had a question. Not sure he heard me.
Yep,
So,
sorry.
Okay.
Trying to unmute. No, I just was asking about security issues. I mean, with stuff like that, that's free. I mean, obviously they're getting something out of it. They're not just doing it for the goodness of their own heart. So I thought maybe Charles might know if there's security issues with using some of those free services.
There could be, but I mean, nowadays, I mean, I'm to the opinion of privacy is an illusion. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you're on Facebook, yeah, you've got no privacy in your life, period. So, yes, there's security issues in the case of like freeconference.com. Can I tell that I've gotten more spam since I've signed up with them? Have they sold my email address? I'm not getting any more spam than I already do after, you know, using the same email address for the last 15 years. But, you know, I mean, there's things like that out there. Like, I'm trying to remember with free conference, when you first dial into the deal, you might have to listen to a 30-second ad before you join the conference. That's how they make their money, you know. There's different things like that. But, yeah, security can be a concern with some of the free solutions. But, like I say, if you're worried about somebody snooping on you when you're getting on the Internet, then you probably shouldn't be on the Internet to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's going to get trolled at one point or another. You know, especially if you're somewhat outspoken. you put an opinion out there, somebody's going to come and attack you for it, I swear. Any other resources that you guys can think of in regards to communicating with members? I mean, this is a great list so far. I think... all right, hang on a second. I'm reading the notes here. Go ahead, Loan.
Did you guys, I kind of dropped off a couple times. Did you guys talk about the private communities for Google Plus?
Private communities for Google Plus.
Yeah, because we did a mission trip last year, to Jamaica. So we did like down in Rivers Falls. All the pictures and stuff that we have from there are in a private group, and if they don't have your email, you can't get in and can't see it. So that keeps the people that's not in there or who went, if they didn't go, they don't get to see what happened while we went there. But you can also do them for a church, so you get their email list. If they're in there, they'll be in there, and it keeps the spam down and away, because if they can't find it, they can't get in it unless they get an invite. Because you can make a profile where you can't even search it to find it. Or you can make it joinable. So that's what I use for that. We have a couple of groups from Sacramento Church I go to that, you know, what happens is a couple of groups stays a couple of groups. I have pictures from a couple of trips that we have that are in the private community, and if we don't have your email, you just can't see it. And if you were in a group and you share something that you shouldn't, unless you know who shared it, and then they can get blocked. So then they're not in it anymore. So that's another option. Plus, you can do private hangouts where if they only have invites, they can only get in it. Also, you know. So I don't know if that was brought up though, but that was one I know I've been using for private groups. So,
Charles, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't used that one, so that's a new one on me. I mean, I kind of started out in the Facebook world and then migrated, you know, to the Google world for a lot of things. So, you know, I can speak more to the private, you know, Facebook group deal. You know, you've got similar controls in the Facebook world when you create a private group as well. But hey, I'm becoming one with the Borg as far as Google's concerned. So, I mean, yeah, if you can integrate that in with the rest of your Google services, great. I mean, it sounds like a definite option. It's just like I say, in our case, the folks that we had online were Facebook people, so that's why I started a Facebook group. But like I say, once Facebook changed their algorithm on what showed up in people's news feeds, our Facebook group kind of died. It doesn't get looked at near as much as it used to.
Look at me. Well, I know with Facebook, I kind of got away from it because with Facebook, you get all the, I won't say garbage, but you get all the garbage. At least in the community, you're not getting. You can block it so you only get stuff. You can set it up so you only get stuff from that community. Then you don't get all the other trash from, not trash, but all the other mess. You know, that's why I kind of moved away from Facebook. You have so much. I don't say nonsense, but nonsense, you know. So you can block that out a little bit easier. Plus, you know, if somebody posts something that's not supposed to be posted, you can also go in and the moderator can go through and take it out or whatever. So that way, it won't go until it's approved. I mean, not approved, approved. So that kind of keeps it nice also. You know, because some people nowadays they post everything, and you know, some of that stuff you shouldn't post, and they don't pay attention to where it's going also. So with a private community, you can kind of take that out of it. There's no accident of posting it there because you got to go find it, you know, so that keeps it away, you know, keeps it nicer, you know, but I don't know.
Well, and I think it's also important to, so take our, the church tech community that a lot of us are a member of, you know, right over on the side, it's an open community, but right over on the side, you have the community rules, you know, and they can be as specific as you, the owner, creator of the group, need them to be. And if somebody violates those, it's up to you. Do you warn them, or do you just boot them? You know, that's up to you. And however you want to do it, but it's nice to have that option as the moderator to say, look, you know, this isn't okay. I mean, you could have a private church group, let's say, like we do, and somebody's just in there posting whatever videos or infographics or pictures strikes their fancy, right? But if it's not relevant to the group, then that's better for their personal page, their personal profile, because realistically, what is going in that church group needs to be very relevant and very specific to the goings-on of the church, and if somebody's violating that, then that needs to be addressed. So I think it's a viable option. I think churches should maybe not choose one or the other, Google Plus or Facebook. I think maybe they should look into both, because I know that some people have issues with Google that don't have issues with Facebook, and vice versa. But something that, in closing here, that we haven't talked about is Skype. What do you guys think about Skype?
Skype is better one-on-one, I think. I think it's great for something I'd love to see more churches do is Skype calls with missionaries. I think that would be perhaps very impactful to see. This is someone on the ground over in Uganda. I don't even know how open Uganda is, but let's say they're over there, and you can kind of really see what's going on, even more than, well, a lot of us that grew up in the 80s and 90s had to suffer through horrible slide presentations of missionary slides at least once or twice a year. But there's something about, yeah, I just got back from this tribal meeting that they invited me to, and it was the first time because they didn't trust me at all for the first 5 years that I was here. Something like that I think could be really great to have. You've got a time issue, of course, depending on where it is. If someone's in Central America, less of an issue. If someone's in China, big issue. So there's that, but I think that you can really get people involved with what God is doing in different parts of the world using Skype.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you could even use Skype or Google Hangout, Video Hangout, or any of these video chat tools to get around the time zone difference if you could figure out a way to record that. And I know, like, for example, every time we do a Hangout on air, it goes to my channel automatically, and it's, I believe, comes up as an unlisted video. So yes, it's streamed live, but if nobody has the link, then nobody can watch it live, right? So you could do that, let YouTube record it for you, keep it private, and then when it's time for the church service, you could, I mean, it's a pre-recorded interview, basically. You could play that live, or play it back live, or edit it, or whatever, for time. So I think it's an incredibly useful idea for a tool, and I think you just need to go with the one that's comfortable for you. One more question, and then we'll wrap up. Craig, in the event page, he's been a faithful watcher or viewer this entire Hangout. He asks, in regards to Facebook and Google+, have you experienced any issues, good or bad, with multiple public or private pages and groups created representing different parts of your church? So, for example, our church, we've got the Epicos creative team, we've got the tech team, we have the main church group. Those are the three that I know about. I'm pretty sure that there are probably other ones, like pastor-specific ones and that kind of thing. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you had good experience, bad experience? My experience has been very positive with doing that. But we could be the exception.
I think probably the biggest thing that I've seen is people forget just how flat text is. You know, they say at least 60% of communication is nonverbal, maybe more, and that's on the low end at 60%. Some people say it's in the high 90s. And so when you just have text, I was in a discussion the other day where I swear this person, everything that I said, he read it as sarcastic and mean. Everything. So if I said, have a good day today, he would say, oh, so you don't want me to have a good day. You know, so you can get into that situation where I said have a good day today and he heard have a good day, moron, you know, that kind of thing. And what he was reading, I went back and read, and it's a viable reading, but it's not one where he was assuming the best. And I think that you've got to make sure that that's clearly stated, that people need to assume the best. Things I've seen not in a specific church, but in Christian groups in general, is you can get people that think that if it has anything to do with Jesus, that it's appropriate to put up in a group, and that just goes crazy. So like the church tech group that a lot of us are a part of, occasionally someone will say, hey, I noticed that this symbol is the mark of the beast, and you're like, what does that have to do with ProPresenter? You know, and you can really devolve quickly into people bringing up what the Apostle Paul called disputable issues. And so I think that we've all got to keep in mind the exact same thing that the Apostle Paul had, that there are some things that we should just agree to disagree about. They're not salvation issues, and just move on from there. So I think that that's a possibility with these things. Tim, if you do have a second, there's something I wanted to point out in a setting in Facebook that we've said wrong a couple of times in this Hangout.
Oh, sure.
You can actually subscribe. You can change the notification settings for a group in Facebook, for example. So I'm on mine right now, and I think I'd suggest, if you wanted to get people to do this, you do a screen capture of the exact steps to do it, but you can have it notify you just highlights, that's the default, just when friends post, off for no notifications whatsoever. Or what I would say is, if someone's part of your church's group and they want to get all the notification, there's one for all posts. So every time there's something new, it'll show up in their timeline. I think that that's probably what you want to do, is encourage everyone, if you're using Facebook and Facebook groups specifically, that, hey, as soon as you join this group, very first thing, watch this video and do exactly what it does. Otherwise, you're going to miss half the discussion. And by half, I mean all but 10% of the discussion. So that's something I wanted to point out.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I just made it a habit of going on to my Facebook page, and I'll just keep track of, about once a week I'll go through and kind of clear out my group notifications that are on the left side of my screen, because it'll tell me, you know, oh, there's 10 new posts, or there's, you know, whatever, and if I want to go look at it, I go look at it, and if I don't, I don't. You know, like there's Gurus of Tech as a group on Facebook that I'm part of, and people are, oh my word, that is one active group. But yeah, I appreciate that information, and I think we've done a really good job of kind of covering a pretty broad topic, and introducing some tools and resources that probably a lot of people didn't know about. I mean, I hadn't heard of any of really anything that Charles brought up. So, Charles, again, thanks for your research and for presenting, and Paul, thanks for sharing again. And stay tuned, because next week we are going to have another exciting topic that you're just going to have to wait to find out what it is. So thanks for watching, and until next time, God bless.